Buyer agency compensation in Colorado, the changes coming are going to be a little bit different than a lot of other states out there. The main reason for that is Colorado is one of the states that already had a buyer agency agreement before all of the NAR lawsuit stuff started. So I am loving that a lot of my clients and a lot of the buyers and sellers that I'm sitting down with are asking me the question of, so what's changing? I heard about this lawsuit. I'm not sure what's going on. Something about agent compensation. Can you help me understand? I love it when people ask me that question because it gives me the opportunity to explain what was going on before and what's going to change for Colorado. Because a lot of the contracts that agents have to use are different not only by state, but in some states are different by metro area. They're different by county. They can change so much based on your geographic area. Here in the state of Colorado, the Colorado Real Estate Commission sets our forms for the state for licensed real estate brokers to use. So anyone that is a licensed agent is a licensed real estate broker associate in the state of Colorado. Every agent does business differently. What I'm going to speak to is how my process is going to change very slightly to accommodate the new legislative changes. Previously, my process for the buyers was someone calls me and says, hey, Stacie, so-and-so said I should call you, or I saw you on YouTube. I'm thinking about buying a house. How do I start this? Let's get started with a buyer consultation. I'm going to ask a few questions over the phone just to get some basic information, but I'm going to start with sitting down, ideally in person or over Zoom. What that allows me to do is to see what they do and don't know. This is for first-time buyers, repeat buyers, any buyers that I'm going to be working with. And when we go through that consultation, it gives me a really good understanding of what information do they already have? What questions can I answer for you? Explain how the whole purchase process works, how I usually get paid, when they need to hire me to be their agent, different ways that we can work together in the state of Colorado. I can be a transaction broker or I can be a hired buyer's agent, okay? Or they can just be a customer in case that I'm working for the seller. There's options there that a lot of people do not understand. And honestly, I'll link to a video down below. That's why I got in the business because I didn't realize the person that helped me buy my first house was not my agent and did not work for me. It's the reason I do this. I'm very passionate about buyer agency and representing people. In that consultation, we can talk about that. Then usually after the consultation, they're working on their pre-approval, doing some homework. I send them a home search portal through the MLS so that they can look at homes. We can make notes, see what they do and don't like. Then I set up a learning day. I'll link to learning day. It explains how I go through that process with my buyers. In the past, I would ask my buyers to sign a buyer agency agreement, hiring me to work for them after we did learning day, because I want us to have an opportunity to work together a little bit. And it's a test drive, right? If you're going to go buy a car, you're going to test drive the car, see if it feels good, see if you like where things are at. That's what learning day was for me. However, it does involve showing houses. Now that you are ready, willing, and able to buy, if the right thing were to come along, let's go look at some stuff and get a better idea what you're looking for and help me understand what you do and don't like. But that's me showing 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 homes if they're coming in from out of town. Before, I would show those homes and say, okay, do we like working together? Cool, let's sign a buyer agency agreement. So you hire me to promote, protect your interests with utmost good faith, loyalty, and fidelity to be your buyer's agent. That is the legal language in part of that document. That was my process before. Now what is changing, I have to have a signed buyer agency agreement or a signed agreement of some type detailing how I get compensated before I let you in a house, before I open the door and show you a property. That is the legal change right now that I'm having to make to my process. Every agent does things differently. I will tell you, most agents didn't ask people to sign an agency agreement at all or until they made an offer. Like, oh, now that we're writing an offer, is it cool if I'm your agent? Yeah, okay, cool. Here's how I get paid. The seller's going to pay me. Don't worry about it. Guys, that was never the right conversation to have. And that's a lot of the reason that we were in this mess in the first place. I'm talking to buyers during the consult of how I get compensated, when I get compensated, how all that works. And part of that is a buyer agency agreement. And that's our agreement on how I get paid. Now I have to have that signed a little bit earlier, and I'm going to allow a temporary time for my buyers to say, you know what, we did learning day. It didn't work out. We'd rather go work with somebody else. Can you recommend somebody or something like that? And I'm going to say, hey, cool, we're going to do a test drive period. We just have to document how I get paid if you decide to buy something during that test drive period. That's really the only thing that's going to change for me and my buyers in the process. With sellers, honestly, I'm still having the same conversation I've always had of, hey, seller, I charge this. I recommend that you offer this to a buyer's agent that brings a buyer, because that buyer may not be able to pay their agent. I had this exact conversation with a couple the other day because they asked amazing questions and they said, so if a seller is not willing to pay your commission, will we know that before we offer to buy the house? I said, absolutely. So previously I would know that by looking in the MLS, because even our MLS shares that information and syndicates that out of how much the seller was willing to offer. Doesn't mean that's what I worked out with the buyer, but that's how much the seller was willing to offer to a buyer's agent. Now with the settlement agreement, that goes away, not only to the public, but to us as agents. So I have to call the seller's agent ahead of time and say, hey, is the seller offering any compensation on this house? Are you offering to pay me as a buyer's agent for bringing a ready, willing, and able buyer? Is that something that the buyer needs to negotiate in the contract? Or are you expecting the buyer to pay for it? So now it's a conversation, and I need to have that documented on a separate piece of paper ahead of time. And our purchase contract is changing slightly to memorialize those conversations or how the buyer wants to offer that and how the seller wants to negotiate it. So there are some changes that are happening contractually, not nearly as many as some other states that have not had these buyer agreements in place. They've not had buyer representation agreements or exclusive agreements in place. Luckily, in Colorado, there's not a lot of changes for us. I think the agents that are having a hard time with us or are freaking out about it are the ones who have not already been having those conversations with their clients. For me, in my process, it's very, very minor changes with me and my buyers. And as I mentioned with my sellers, now it's just a conversation of it. Before, our MLS said you had to offer something. You could have offered $1. It was probably not in your best interest to do that. It may have been. It's totally your choice. I've always been having those conversations. Now I'm just saying, instead of having to offer something like $1, now you don't have to offer anything. And by the way, now the agents are going to call me ahead of time to see what we're offering versus me being able to make that part of the listing and send that out to everybody. This is not an industry altering craziness change that's going to completely disrupt everything and prevent us from doing business. These are slight tweaks for us to document things differently and different conversations to have at different periods of the process. If you have any questions about that, please feel free to leave them down below. Granted, I'm legally limited on what I can answer because I'm not an attorney. But I want to be transparent with people on how that's going to change my process. And those are the things that I'm talking to my buyers about, because I know there's a lot of people that are wanting to know how this works, but there's not a lot of information out there on it. If you have any other questions, feel free to leave them down below. That gives me ideas on what to film for y'all. If this was helpful, please hit the like button. You can subscribe to my channel if you want to sit down with me and do a buyer consultation or seller consultation. I would love the opportunity to help you out, make a game plan, see if we're a good fit to work together. I have a link down below. You can pick a time right off my calendar and let's make it easy to sit down and make a game plan. Thanks so much for the time and have a great day.